Hi there everybody. I'll give you a few minutes to get yourselves all ready to all log into the live, and then I'll start doing things. So it'll just be me chatting for a minute, so don't panic if you've just tuned in and you're not quite ready yet. I won't kind of jump the gun and be too early. So I was just going to talk through what the materials we're going to be using are, just so that you can have them available. So we're going to do a desert scape today. It's kind of a fairly interesting but fairly basic technique with blending colours wet on wet. So it's really nice to cut your teeth if you're a beginner, but it's also a nice enough challenge if you're a little bit further along. So I was trying to gauge it just about right so that I could inspire you a little bit, because if it's a bit too easy, then it's just feels a bit unfulfilling when you paint something. So I'll do something that's fairly basic technique, but you should have a fairly decent effect at the end of it, which is we always need that for our confidence, don't we? Excuse my hair, I just realised I look like I've been dragged through a hedge backwards. I haven't been. I have been in the shop all day. But I don't know, maybe I had a bit of static this morning or something, I don't know. So what I've got materials-wise to use, I've just got A4 piece of watercolour paper. Haven't got anything particularly special. It's 300 grams, but it's just cellulose. It's nothing super amazing. It's very readily available, and it works quite well. So I'm just going to use that. So if you're not an experienced watercolour painter, then don't fret that you haven't got super amazing watercolour paper. If you do take an interest in it and you want to do some more classes, there's still plenty of options that you can try. It depends how far you want to go with it really, but you can upgrade to really nice cotton paper. Hot pressed and cold pressed paper like Archer's is just lovely and amazing to paint on, but obviously the price tag matches that. So if you're not there yet, then a cellulose version is fine. You can get them from loads of different art shops. I was actually going to put together some packs in Viners on the Hill in case people didn't want to or didn't know what to get, and wanted to have a ready-made pack. So if you want to do that, I'm going to have some of those available for people to try. I'm going to be offering more and more classes as time goes on. I've got quite a few one-to-one classes that have been booked this week, which is fantastic, and really looking forward to those. So yeah, if you do find yourself wanting to have a bit of a go at watercolour, because it is a brilliant art form to do, it's much easier than people think. The first time you do it can be really daunting, but once you've learnt a few techniques, it's actually really fun, and it's a really nice way of painting. You can have some fairly basic watercolour palettes. Winsor & Newton and companies like that do some really good quality ones, good enough for you to use. Cotmans and stuff like that, perfectly fine for something like that. If you want to do some of the more interesting techniques, some of which we'll be doing today, where the water and the paint forms a really beautiful bloom of colour, then obviously the better quality you get, the better the bloom that you have. If you have a fairly cheap standard set, it's going to colour the paper, but you won't get a really nice bloom. Whereas if you have a really lovely brand of paint, it blooms really well. So hopefully throughout these classes you'll be able to experiment, and if you want to try some new paints, then I have some here. Hopefully through our classes you'll be able to see the difference between the different qualities of paint. You can get some beautiful vibrant colours with the beginner sets. They're fine in terms of colours and they're really good to cut your teeth on, but in terms of the different techniques that you can do and the different blooms and the different effects, then it's really the better quality paint that you can have the most fun with when you're watercolouring. Also in terms of brushes, it's really good to have what are called mop brushes. So they hold a really large amount of water. They're really soft. You can wet the paper down really well, which is, if you've got good quality paper, then it goes hand in hand with a good quality brush. So I've got a mixture of okay paints and then some really, really nice paints. And then I've got a mixture of some okay brushes and some amazing brushes. So hopefully you'll be able to see some of that come across in some of these freebie classes that I'm doing, and then you can decide if you want to go the extra mile and get something like that for yourself. So it's up to you. How are we doing for time? I can see we've got a few people on. Hi Cheryl, are you okay? Goodness, I haven't seen you for a long time. How are we doing for time? Okay, so hopefully there's a few people on. Oh, I can see my mother-in-law's on. Hi Wendy. So give us a bit of a wave. Let me know that you can hear me okay and you can see me okay. I will be trying to follow messages as and when it goes. Oh, I just saw Kate come up. Hi Kate. If you want to ask questions, if you want to do anything, interact with me, then I'll try my best to answer. Hello. And be really nice to hear from you. Hoping that these classes will be beneficial and if you can kind of interact. Oh, hi Amanda. How's it in France? Is it okay? Hopefully it's not flooded. That's my neighbour in France. And a little bit worried about our place down there because it was really flooded the other day. So yeah, I will get started now and you can feel free to ask me questions. Oh, hi Jensen, honey. Brilliant. Oh, sunny today in France. Yay. Oh, I so want to come back down there. Thanks, Kate. I hope you're doing well. Okay, so I'm going to get started because I've allowed about an hour for this. It is quite fast moving, but obviously I don't want to go too fast because I'm aware that some people... Hi, Christina. I'm aware that some people are beginners and probably don't want to go flying through it. So I'm going to try and take it nice and steady. So first of all, I will... I'm just going to put my phone in here. Sorry, until I turn it round. Okay. So if I move that back a tiny bit. Right, can you all see that okay? Is that a bit too close? Let's see if I can make that a bit higher. Hopefully that's okay position-wise for you. Okay, so I'm going to mask off. You don't have to by any means. This is an optional thing, but I'm going to mask just because it leaves me a bit more hands-free to do what I want to do. So a lot of people have issues with masking tape ripping their work. Hi Joe. Oh, it's A4 piece of paper, Christina, so I'm trying to not work too big at the moment. I normally paint around A4 or A5. That's a really nice size to paint. If you go up towards A3, you're looking at quite a lot of water and quite fast-paced work. So I try not to go up too big. So yeah, I've just got some really cheap, nothing special masking tape here. And in order to stop it from ripping the paper, what I would do generally, I'll just, if I can move my camera around, let me see if I can. So what I'll do, I've got my apron on here. So what I do is I take off however much tape I need, and then I just do this several times on my clothes. And what it does is it just picks up a few fibres from your clothes and takes some of the sticky off of the tape, so that it doesn't rip quite so badly. So if I do that and then and then I just line up my paper where I'd like it on there and line up the masking tape. This is a good thing about fairly cheap masking tape, is that you see through it really well. So I'm just going to mask that off. So I'm just going to do that around the whole of my work. So if you're going to also mask yours, you can do that now, or you can just chat to me. Ah, Jo, it's lovely to hear from you as well. I haven't seen you for ages, my love. These are all my face and body painting friends. So we've all not been working, obviously, because of the pandemic. So it's been a real nuisance, really hit the industry hard. So we're all doing different things now and trying to catch up whenever we can. So it's nice to see all my buddies. So you can probably hear me doing the tape again, so I'm just doing my next bit of tape. So I'm going to try and... I do have it on a measuring board, which is really helpful. It's just a use for a cutting mat or a sewing board or anything like that. But it's really helpful if you're not very good at measuring up by eye, if you want really super straight lines, like if you're going to frame it afterwards and you want to make sure that you do have super straight lines. So a cutting mat is really good. It also gives a slightly flexible surface underneath, which I quite like. I know some people prefer a really solid board, but I really like the flexibility and the softness of a cutting mat. And you can also measure up all your margins, and everything can be really equal then. So let me just get this taped out. It's also very satisfying at the end of your paint, once you've left it to dry, to remove your outside tape and you have that lovely crisp line, hopefully. So I find things like that very satisfying. That and time lapses is really, really satisfying. Okay. So I'm just doing this by eye, even though I've got my measuring board here, because I'm trying to keep half an eye on messages and stuff like that as well. Make sure that I'm saying hello and being friendly to everybody. So I've got that tape now. So this isn't particularly great quality paper. So I am going to have a little bit of buckling, and that's fairly usual for this kind of paper. But the tape will help it from buckling too much. So hopefully I won't have big, huge troughs for the water to all seep into. So hopefully that will work quite well. So I'll just kind of sketch out with my hand to give you an idea of where things are, because it really helps before you start drawing or painting that you know where everything's going to go. In terms of your layout, because then you know how much room to leave for certain things. So we're going to keep this is going to be like an Arizona desert, and so we want to keep it fairly bare, fairly sparse. We don't want too much going on in it. The whole point is it needs to look fairly desolate, so you don't have to worry in terms of spacing if you're going to have room for everything on the painting. So what we're going to have the horizon line is going to be fairly low on the paper. It's going to be maybe less than the bottom third, so maybe only 10 centimetres or so up from the bottom, so not very much. So this is going to be our horizon here. The rest of this is going to go from a deep Arizona sunset right up into really dark indigo here for the space. So we're going to do some stars and some flecks and things like that, which will be quite cool. And then down here on the Arizona desert, we're going to have some interest in the landscape. We're going to have a few cacti and things like that. And hopefully, with the effect that we're going to use, we're going to have some of the light spilling down onto the desert and making it look a little bit like a mirage on the desert. So I know it sounds kind of complicated, but it really isn't. It's quite an easy technique. Okay, so I'm going to start with a really big brush. Don't worry if you haven't got one as big as this, any old kind of mop brush will be fine. So I've got one here. I've just bought some really nice brushes. I treated myself. So I've got some, these are called Silver Black Velvet, which are really nice brushes. And this one's a 1.5. So I use this when I'm using lots and lots of water over a big area, and it keeps the paper really wet, because I don't want to have to keep re-wetting the paper, because if you drop rivulets of water onto the pigment that's already on the paper, you end up with the bloom effect, which I don't necessarily want for my sky. I would really like, it will be helpful if I do part of the Milky Way on the sky, so I might do it deliberately later, but this bit I want to control and have a nice smooth blend. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my colours ready first of all. So I'm going to have, right down at the bottom here, I'm going to have an Indian yellow, which is a very bright golden yellow. So if you don't have Indian yellow, find one that's not a lemon yellow, but kind of a slightly oranger version of a lemon yellow. And we're going to do our horizon upwards with that really bright golden yellow. We're then going to kind of migrate from that into an orange and then a cadmium red hue, which is kind of a reddy orangey colour. And then we're going to progress from that up to a purple and then to an indigo. So we have like a whole spectrum on the sky as it goes up to higher in the atmosphere. Right, so that I wouldn't normally do this on my paintings, but I'm going to do it so that you can see where I go. So I'm going to give myself a horizon line so that I know where I'm going. So there's my horizon line. Hopefully you can see that okay. So all of this is going to be sky. And then here I'm going to have some slightly more rocky kind of outcroppings here. So that's all I need to do in terms of that. There's going to be a few cacti here, so I'm going to draw those here just so that you can see roughly where I'm going with this. So this one's going to have an arm coming out here. And there's another one here. So this is kind of like your conventional cactus. And then I'm going to do another one of those here in the foreground. Okay, and then I'm going to do maybe a big agave plant here. Okay, maybe some other slightly smaller agaves here. So agaves are the ones that a bit like an aloe vera plant. So they have kind of wide flat leaves with spines on them. And obviously they're a desert plant, but they're this gorgeous kind of almost eucalyptus blue. So I wanted to have something like that there. Now bear in mind, the reason I don't often use pencil to sketch out what I'm doing is that once you've applied water over the top of it, it then becomes permanent. So you either need to be using opaque enough colour that it doesn't matter too much when you use water, because you're going to make the paint so dark that you won't see the pencil lines anyway. Or if you're using a wash, which is what we're using, you need to be okay with the fact that your pencil lines will still be visible. So for that reason, I don't often use pencil, or if I do, I use a watercolour pencil, because then when you apply the water, it dissolves the pencil and makes things a little bit more in keeping, so you don't get any harsh lines anywhere. But for this one, I just wanted you to see what my layout is going to be, so that you know, as you're placing layers on, you know roughly what we're looking at here. Okay, so let's start with applying some water then. So what I'm going to do, if you haven't got a brush as big as this, just find the biggest brush that you have, and we're going to soak this whole area right up here, right up to where your masking tape is at the top. So right from your horizon line upwards. Now we want enough water that when we touch paint into it, it's going to bloom and mix really nicely, and we can use a brush to help that along. We don't want so little water that it's going to dry before we've done all of our mixing. So it's a bit of a balancing act here. So if you can try and get the balance right, then it works beautifully. If not, then we can go over and do a second layer. So don't worry if you haven't got enough water on there, or if your watercolour paper dries out quickly. So I've switched off my, I've got some heated blowers up here. I've switched them off because I don't want it to dry too quickly, because I want to be able to do it at a pace that you'll be able to see. Okay, so let's get my colours ready. So my first colour is going to be an Indian yellow. So I'm just going to get, I have a ceramic palette here, I'll show you. So I have a ceramic palette ready. So I'm just going to get my Indian yellow ready on here. So you can see roughly what kind of a colour that is. It's kind of a yolky colour, I suppose, is a good way of describing it for those that aren't familiar with the colours. And I'm going to have my paper towel ready as well. So if you've got some paper towels, I want my paper towel ready, because where my sun is, I'm going to blot the Indian yellow away. I've got an alizarin crimson already on my ceramic palette. So it's just here, my alizarin crimson. So I'll put some water in it just so you can see how strong the colour is. So I've got my alizarin crimson there. And then I've got, this is kind of a real bright blue. It's kind of like a real sort of bright sky blue. And then there's this one over here, which is more like a ultramarine type colour. So this is Sennelier blue. So if you're painting along with nice paints, so this is Sennelier blue, which is a really nice deep blue. And then I've also got a, where is it? This is a blue violet, which we're going to be going up into. So this is the colour that we're going up into. And then from that into an indigo. So if you just have some of your colours out ready, mixed in your palette, then that will be really helpful, because then you can literally just dip your brush in them and apply them straight to your paper. Okay, so I'm just going to move those to one side so that you can see what I'm doing on here. Just going to give that brush a quick wash and a clean. Okay, so I'm dipping my brush into the clean water. I try and keep one pot of clean water and one pot for rinsing my brush. So the reason I do that is so that I don't have too much contamination through my colours, because on a really bright painting like this, I don't want them to get too muddy. So I've got a really good load of water on my brush. I don't know if you can see how much water that holds, but quite a substantial amount. So I'm just going to put that straight on. And I'm going to go over several times just to make sure that my paper is as wet as I need it. It helps sometimes if you in a room that's got some natural light, for you to put the paper between yourself and the light so that you can see that you've covered all of the paper fully, because it's only really when you see the sheen of the water that you can see that you've got it everywhere. Okay, so I've covered all of that. So now I'm going to go straight in with that Indian yellow on the same brush, because I want to get my colour on nice and quickly. So I'm going to come just below that horizon line, because I want there to be kind of a slight mirage on the desert. So now I'm just turning my brush on its side. You see my brush comes to a nice point. I'm just turning it on its side just to give, you can tell these are new brushes. I'm getting little hairs come off. So I want to put some lines into this. Oh, sorry. Oh, this is terrible. I gave him a really good brush as well before. So I'm just putting some lines into my work, because I want there to be, let me move my ceramic palette over. I want there to be like the clouds are slowly fading away. So I've come up to about just over halfway up my skyline, and now I'm going to go into the alizarin crimson and come back a slight bit, just because I want that white and yellow and alizarin crimson to mix, because I want to have a slight graduation of colour. Oh, this is terrible, these brush hairs. Right, let me get rid of them. Okay. That's better. Okay. So I'm going to keep working it up and working it through. This is the worst thing about new brushes. When you're trying to tackle hairs. Is anybody else working with a new brush? So I don't want to overwork it too much, but I do want there to be a really nice blend of the colour. So I'm just going to go back into a little bit more of that alizarin crimson so I can go a little bit darker up here. And then I'm going to go slightly into that blue purple, because I want it to go up into that as well. And then the blue. Okay, so I've got a nice stripy sky. What I'm going to do now, because I don't want for there to be stripes, I don't want it to be too stripy, I'm going to bring out another fairly big mop brush. So this is a jumbo round, and it's also a silver black velvet, but any jumbo round will do, maybe a size 10, something like that, if you have a size 10. Oh, that's good, Joe. Brilliant. Well done, Wendy. Good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my indigo, because I want to get that sky really dark at the top. So we might have to go through and do a couple of layers of this. So I'm just putting some indigo down, because I want it to go dark. I'm going to put some bits and pieces through here, because when it dries on this wet canvas, it's going to look like clouds collecting in the desert. That's kind of what I want. So you use the water to get these blooms of colour, and they dry nice and soft, and we get these. So I've just got my brush on its side and I'm literally doing just, I'm letting some of that colour show through. I'm keeping some of the pink here because I want to have that slowly evolving colour. And I'm just going to darken off this top and the corners as much as I can. So this is indigo that I'm using to darken off here. So I just want to get it nice and dark. I just keep going back and I'm not adding any more water to my brush. I'm just going straight into the indigo because I want to get this really nice and dark. And every time I add another layer of colour, it makes the dark blue really intense. And that's what I want. Okay, I'm just going to give my brush a quick wash out so that I can add some more faint lines. Okay, I quite like that colour. I really like it being like that, but I might add a tiny little bit more indigo because I really want to have some stars in this. I want it to be the latter stages of a sunset and this gorgeous dark sky up here. So while this is still wet, I'm just going to keep darkening it. So this is why you need a bigger brush at the beginning, because when you're trying to get things just right, you need to have this to stay wet for a really long time so that you can get these bits of the sky nice and dark. So when this dries, this indigo is going to go, the colour of the sky, it's going to go really dark. It's exactly what I want because we're going to splash some stars and stuff like that on here later. So I want it to be really, really dark. How you're doing? Are you doing good? I hope some of you are painting along. Right, final layer of indigo. Going to do some more defined strokes in here now for my sky. When you get those really fine clouds that interrupt your horizon. Okay, that's good. I'm going to leave that there like that. I know, the colour spread is just so lovely, Joe. I really love it when you do it on a time lapse because you get to see that the tiniest little freckle here just blooms out into this really beautiful colour. Especially when you work with things like Viridian and indigo, it just blooms into the most magnificent colour and starts separating, and it's really lovely. I really like it. Okay, So I'm just going to use a clean brush now. I want to re-wet the horizon because I'm just going to intensify the yellow here because the yellow isn't very stark here. So I just want to re-wet it because I want to do a couple of different things. So now it's nice and dry down here, I can re-wet it safely. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to do some more intense Indian yellow just down here because I want it to be really vivid at the horizon. So do you remember that I said a few minutes ago that I wanted I wanted you to grab a piece of kitchen roll or something so that we could make the sun on the horizon. So I'm just going to grab a nice clean piece of kitchen roll, and on this wet horizon here I'm going to use my finger inside a piece of kitchen roll. So I'm just going to wrap it up so that I have a nice kind of circular shape on the end, and then I'm just going to push my finger into this here to do a colour lift. So if you do this, you'll end up with a bright spot. So then I'm just going to fold this into a flat edge like this, and then I'm going to do a few lines either side of my bright white circle, and then I'm going to make a little spike on my tissue, and I'm going to drag it up from that white edge like this. So it looks like sunbeams, so it looks like the sun is just sinking below the horizon. Just going to rub out this bit here because I want to have some white reflected on the desert here. Remember I said that we needed a mirage? So if we use our tissue to wipe away some of this, we get this lovely white sort of reflection from the sun here. Just going to push that onto there again just to make that as white as I can do, because I want that sun to be really bright white. Okay, that's good. Okay, how you're doing? Are you doing good? The blue, what, the indigo blue, Joe? Is that the one that you mean? I think it's probably my favourite colour, the indigo. It's so deep and dark, and you can either make it really romantic looking or you can make it really sort of scandalous, and it's a brilliant colour. It's my favourite colour. So we've already got now, from just doing some very simple side to side, we've got a real depth here. So we've got the horizon line here with the sun spilling out over the top of it and this gorgeous kind of sunbeams coming out, and then it kind of goes into this kind of seashell sky, and then you've got all these different layers of clouds. So you've got some of the cumulonimbus clouds that are kind of fluffing up and making the atmosphere, making it really kind of dramatic, and then you've got some of the smaller wispy clouds, and then you've got the really deep sky. So later on we're going to put some stars up in here just to give it a little bit more impact. If you're going to bring the night sky down, you could put some of the Milky Way beginning up here. So we can do another one another night that's going to be a galaxy-based one, and I'll show you how to do the Milky Way. That's a really fun technique to do that, and I really love doing that. It always looks amazing. Okay, so let's move on. So our next layer is going to be on the horizon side, but a long way away. So we're going to start with that bit, and we're just going to paint over where our cacti are, because they're in the immediate foreground. They're going to be almost totally black, so they're going to be the darkest part of our picture. So on the horizon side, we want everything to be completely saturated with the sunlight of the setting sun. So what we're going to do, we're going to go for a slightly smaller brush. So I've got, this is a number 8 on the silver black velvet, but I think it equates more to probably like a 6 if you've got a regular round brush. It's quite a small one, but it comes out to a really nice point. So I want that because I want to have some really craggy rocks appearing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a kind of a Prussian blue indigo, but very, very faint with water. So let me show you. So let me just put some Prussian blue. So I've got tiniest bit of Prussian blue in there, and tiniest bit of indigo. So I want this kind of like slightly grey, but very watery wash, because we want just a real faint inkling of something going on the horizon here. So here's our horizon line. We've gone over it with our sun. Hopefully you can still see it. Hopefully you can. Can you still see it? Someone give me a thumbs up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the point of the brush. So when I load my brush, I'm going to load it so that, if I can get it to focus, I'm going to load it so that the point of my brush is fully loaded and my point is really crisp on my brush. And then I'm going to use that point to do a kind of a jaggedy edge. So I'm going to go along my horizon line and do a jaggedy edge as though it's mountains. Okay, let's do it from this side too. So I want it to pick up some of that yellow from before. Okay, and where we've got it blending in at the base here, so where there's this line here currently, we're just going to use a brush, a clean brush with just water on it, not very much water, just brush it against the side of your pot, lay it on a tissue like this, just to take most of the water off. We don't want it squeezed or anything like that, we just want it wet. And then we're going to go along with our wet brush and smooth that line. So we're just going to smooth that out. Because we want that to blend into nothing at all. Okay, so you should have a fairly crisp, noticeable line on your horizon now, with a blended out bottom, and it should have mixed nicely with the yellow that you laid there from earlier. So hopefully it's doing that for you. Ah, good. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Wendy. How many have we got painting along? Is everybody just watching and relaxing and having their cup of tea? Oh, reminds me, I've got a cup of tea here. I'm just going to have a cup of tea. I've deliberately put my tea over the other side. All the painters in the house will know. Once you've drunk your paint water or dipped your indigo paintbrush in your tea, you put them on separate sides. Oh, that's good. So my tea's over there, my water's over there. Otherwise, oh, it just tastes disgusting when you drink your painty water. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. Okay. Right, so we're going to do our next layer now. So that nice number 6, number 8 round that you've just used to do that layer. Yeah, Joe, you know my pain, don't you? How many times have you done that? How many times have you drunk your paint water? It doesn't even help when you get like a drinks well or something like that, because you still put your brush in your mug of tea. Okay, so I'm using on the silver black velvet, it's a number 8, but if you're using any other ones like a Winsor & Newton brush, it's probably more like a 6. So yeah, you know, Joe. I'm surprised we haven't got indigo skin from the amount of paint water we've drunk. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my nice pointy brush so that I can do my next layer of perspective on my horizon. So I'm going to do the same again with a little bit of indigo into that nice water wash that I used before. I'm going to put a tiny little bit of umber in there as well, just to grey it right down. So let me show you the colour that I've got. So it's a real sort of faded grey colour. So I've got that by mixing indigo with a tiny bit of umber, burnt umber, or a dark brown. And you get this kind of like slaty blue colour. It's really beautiful colour. But it's really, really good when you're doing distance mountains and hills and things like that. So I'm just going to do another layer here. So I'm going to kind of go below and above my horizon line that I did before. I want to do that fairly deliberately, otherwise it ends up looking a bit artificial when you have one layer in front of the other. So I'm going to deliberately bring this one in front. So at the moment I'm still painting right over those cacti and things. Going to do a bit of a flat rock there. And this is going to come right up. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to that bigger wash brush. Dip it in my water. It's not dripping. It is wet, but it's not dripping. And then I'm just going to smooth this bottom line again. I want this to kind of blend in. Okay, how are you getting on? You doing good? I hope so. Yeah, it's a really nice brush, isn't it? The silver black velvet, I've been deliberating for a while on which brushes that I wanted to get, and I see lots and lots of watercolour artists using the silver black velvet, and there's lots and lots of really nice brushes out there, but this one is probably, I would say it's middle of the range, but it's really, really good. It stands up to some of the really amazing ones, and you can get a really lovely fine point on it. And it holds so much paint and so much water. It's really, really good. So I'm really enjoying them. I know, I love doing layering on these designs. It's really nice. Okay, so now we've softened that line out a little bit. We've now got these beautiful different layers of the desert scape here. So we want to bring it into the foreground now. So we're going to try and reflect some of this real deep blue, and some of this pink is going to be reflected in it as well, just to give it that kind of mirage effect. So if you could mix a little bit of alizarin crimson with some indigo. So if you've got like a really bright pink and then you can mix it with your darkest blue that you have. I want to get this real kind of deep purple colour. Okay, let me show you the colour I'm mixing. Can you see that okay? So it's kind of like a real deep lilac. I'm just going to put a tiny bit more indigo in there. I want it nice and dark. Okay. So we're going to do our next layer, and this is going to be the layer upon which the cacti are stood. So I'm just going to follow my line here. Do you remember I put on these little outcroppings before? So I'm just going to fill in all this area. So I'm going to do these one at a time because I want to make it really dark at the base. So at the base of these, I'm going to go back with more indigo because I want to get these nice and dark at the base. Try and reflect some of that darkness of the sky. Might even add a little bit of Payne's grey just to get it where I need it. So right down at the very bottom of the paper, we're going to try and get it as black as we can, because in a minute those cacti are going to be really dark. So, and they're going to be cast in the shadow. So we want this to be a light purple here and as dark as we can get down here. So if you can, I try and refrain as much as I can from using black. I don't use black very often, so I'm going to try not to use black, but just try and get it as dark as you can, and hopefully that will spread out really nicely. So I'm just going to go and do the other side now. So I'm going to give my brush a really good rinse, and then I want to go back into that nice dark purple that we mixed and do this outcropping here on the other side. So at the moment I'm just still painting over my plants and bits and pieces there. So this whole area now is wet because I want this colour to blend. I want it to pick up some of that sunshine where we put it on before. I want it to reflect those really nice notes of the sky. So get that indigo in there. Get the indigo working for you. Oh, again, this brush. I always find when I'm using a new brush that I need to give it a good few goes before it stops shedding. But at least with these ones, it doesn't damage the brush at all. Okay, so I'm just going back in with some real deep indigo now. So you can see even when I leave little pools of paint here, it just kind of adds to the texture and then it softens out like it did over here. And it just looks, I think it looks incredibly artificial if you have a painting where everything's just perfectly smooth. It doesn't exist that way in nature. So if you can do it a bit more haphazardly, it just kind of adds to the effect. So I'm going to add a bit more alizarin crimson in there because I want it to have like a real mottled effect on here. Okay. How you doing, guys? You doing all right? I know, the layering's beautiful, isn't it? I love doing landscapes purely because how much fun you can have with the layering. I really like doing layering on all the paintings. And with watercolour, it's just beautiful. You can make it as soft as you want or as bold as you want. It's really hard to do that with other mediums. I do quite like painting with acrylics, but I find that I tend to overwork it and just everything blends into one colour. And I can never get a really satisfactory kind of natural result. So yeah, it's okay, but I think I prefer watercolours because you can do so much more with them. So we're doing quite well at the moment. I've just got a few more minutes left, so I want to head on with the sky. So I've got a brush here. This it's actually a low Cornell brush, but because it's got an acrylic handle, it's got like quite a lot of rigidity. It's got it's quite springy. Trying to find the best way to describe it. A bit like when you bash an acrylic ruler, it has a spring. So when I do this on the brush, you can see that it moves really well. So I really like this particular brush for doing spatters of stars, which is what I want to do now. So now this is nice and dry up here, I want to do some stars up really high. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a tiny bit of white gouache in my palette. You can use white watercolours, or you can use a white gel pen, anything that you like. So I've got a tiny bit of white gouache in here. So what I'm going to do is just mix in some water to this, just to make it nice and wet. So I want it kind of ink consistency, so quite thin. So I'm just going to do that. Tell me, Joe, you haven't drunk your painty water. So I'm just going to put my gouache down there. So what I've got now is I'm going to hold my hand under it because it's quite drippy. You can see it's quite wet on the brush there. So I want it like that. I want it so that it will spatter really well. If you don't trust yourself to do this on your work, then maybe if you have another piece of paper or a paper towel, you can practice on to the side to begin with. What I also do is, just so that I don't get really carried away and end up with a star right in the middle of a hill at the bottom, I just end up putting some tissue paper where I want for them to not end up. So I'm just going to put that there just to shield a little bit. So I'm going to make sure that I've got a really good load on the brush, like this. And then I'm going to do this motion and make some stars. So if I do this, you'll see that you get some really good stars start to appear. This is my favourite way of doing stars. I love doing this because you end up with them suitably random. You end up with lots of different sizes. Some of them start to look like constellations where they've bunched up together. I really like that look. So you can shield off whatever you want on this, but I try and concentrate on doing my stars mainly at the top and in the corners. If you're struggling to do the flick, you can just put a tiny little bit on the end of your brush and just keeping it straight up, do a few tiny little dots. I struggle to do that personally. I'm not very good at doing it that way. So if you're struggling to do the flick, then practice, but also you can get a white gel pen and it will just give you another option. Just makes things a bit easier then. Okay, so my stars are going pretty good. I'm just going to give my brush a quick rinse out because in a minute we're going to finish off the cacti and then our painting's going to be complete. Okay, I'm going to go back to my number 8 brush, but if you're using a number 6 or a number 4, that's fine. So I'm going to go back to using this one. So what I want to do now, I want to use as dark a concentration as I can of indigo, and I'm also going to mix a little bit of Payne's grey in it because I want this to be really nice and dark. I don't want it to be black, ideally. I do want it to be super dark. So I'll show you my colour once I've got it to where I want it. So this is the colour that I'm working with. So it's kind of like the darkest colour that I had in the sky. It's not particularly wet. I want to keep the wash fairly opaque. I don't want it to be too transparent, so I'm using quite a high amount of paint to water ratio on this because I want it to be nice and dark. So it's not collecting too much. Hopefully you can see that in my palette, otherwise it would be beading up quite a lot. It's a really nice colour now. How are you doing with mixing your dark colour? You doing good? The stars are out tonight. Stars are going crazy on my one. Okay. Right, so now I've got my nice dark colour. I'm just loading up my brush and I'm just going to do these cacti. So this is where it helps when you've got a brush with a really good point. Because then you can do a nice firm edge on it. How are you doing with yours? If you're struggling to, I've got my camera literally right under my chin, so I keep moving it. You can switch out to a smaller brush if you need to on your cacti. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to control a larger brush. If you're a painter, you'll probably be fairly used to the different bend of bristles, but if you're not used to doing it, it can be a bit frustrating. So switch out for a smaller brush if you need something that's a little bit finer. That's fine. So you see with that dark blue, it's given a scope to still put shade onto our cacti and make them a bit more dimensional. How's yours going? can just about see my pencil line still, fortunately. Hopefully you've still got your guide there. Unless you were brave and decided to go minus pencil. Okay. So there's our big cacti. I'm now going to do our aloe. So I had a rough kind of shape drawn out, but if you've ever seen how an agave looks, your cacti look like little men. Oh, you should put a little cowboy hat or something on them. That would look so cute. So if you've seen an agave, it kind of goes a bit like a holly leaf. You have like little spines that come out of it. So I'm going to try and replicate that now. This is where a brush with a point comes in really handy, but I appreciate that this is super intricate work, so you don't have to do that if that's tricky for you. So who knows what agave plants are good for? Let's see if we know any alcoholics. Are any alcoholics joining us today? I wish I could drink this drink, but I can't. I'm quite badly allergic to it. No one's as alcoholic as me then. Why am I not surprised? If my daughter's watching this, she'll be laughing. Okay, so there's my giant agave done. Just going to do a couple of smaller ones on the other outcropping. Okay, there we go. So there's my little agave. So in case you didn't know, in case you're not as much of an alcoholic as me, that's what we can make tequila from. I would love to become a tequila connoisseur, but sadly, I don't think that will ever happen. Doesn't do very good things for me. Okay. So this is slightly trickier, this bit. So we want to have a casted shadow from our cacti and from our agaves. So our light source is right here. You can see it, it's our sun. So we need to now measure where our shadow is going to go. So if you want to use your pencil again, you can do. So my sun is there. So my line from my cactus shadow is going to be here, because that's where it's casting a shadow. So you can physically draw it on if you want. Now it's got an arm up here somewhere, which will be further down because the sun's really low in the sky. So I'm going to put it down here. So that's where my shadow is going to go. I'm going to line it up again because the shadow gets bigger and broader as it leaves. So I'm just going to line it up again to see where my shadow goes from this one. And there's my limb coming out on that one. Same for the agave, so I'm going to point my pencil lead to where the sun is, and then I'll be able to see where my agave shadow is going to go. So that's going to fall there. I'm going to do the same with this agave plant, point the lead to where the sun is, and then I know where the shadow is falling. So I'm going to try and make the same shape as the agave in the shadow. Again, point the lead to where the sun is, and then I know where my shadow is going to fall. So that's a cool little trick, and it really helps with the perspective. So now I'm going to use a watered down version of that dark colour that we were using for the cacti, because we want some of the background colour to come through. So I'm just going to water it down a tiny bit, and then I'll be able to do my shadows. So it's going to be at its darkest here at the base. Oh, mess that up. There you go. Make that a bit better. I'm just going to have it fading off into nothing. I'm just going to do my agave shadow. That's gone a bit darker now. Let's make it a bit lighter. How are you getting on? Speak to me, people. Going well? So there's my shadow from this cactus. It's going to be an arm coming out here. And then it's going to be my other agave shadow there. Okay, so you should see that gives you a really nice amount of perspective. Makes it quite believable how it's coming, how the light source is coming from the sun. You can use slightly darker by the base of the plant because there's not going to be as much watering down of the colour there. So if you want to go slightly darker where it meets the actual base of the plant, you can do now while it's still wet. And put some nice texture on here, because this back part of the plant is going to be in serious shadow because the sun is so low in the sky. Okay, so I think that's probably a finished painting now. Oh, no worries, Karen. Oh, thank you for joining us anyway. Yeah, you can watch it on replay later. I'm going to be posting it up to the page so that people that have been a bit busy can watch it later and do it later. That's no problem at all. So don't worry about that. So the last thing I'm going to do now is you always need to sign your work. I think it's quite important to sign and date it, especially if you're still on a journey of watercolour, which most of us are. Most of us never get to a point where we're completely finished doing it. So I think it's really nice to be able to get to a sort of a point where you're still growing and you're still persevering. So I always try and date my work so that I know where my work has stemmed from. So when I can look back at something from 2009, for example, I know how much I've improved since then. So I think it's really good to do that. So I'm just going to add my little signature on here. So I don't know if you've made your own signatures yet. So there's mine. And we'll call that finished. Okay. So let me turn this round. Oh, that's not very nice. That's how close I was to the camera. Right, I'll move back. So, hope you've enjoyed doing that. Hope you've learned something from doing the paint along. I'm going to be doing some more of these, so if you haven't already joined up to the Viners on the Hill art group, so there's an art group for adults and an art group for children. If you want to sign up to either one of those, if you've got young children, the one for children's really great because I put all of my Zoom ones on there, the ones that are password protected. So you'll be able to go onto there and sign them up to a class that's a little bit more secure for children. And then there's also an art group for adults, so I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to build a bank of reference images and things like that that you can paint. I'll be able to put on some classes that aren't live but have been recorded that you can paint along with and do something fun. I'm going to be putting some of my time lapses on there. So if you are interested in art and if you want to learn some things, then I suggest that you join those groups. It's always really nice as well to post things up in a kind of a private group setting so that you can have encouragement for people rather than share it on a page with all your friends on it or something like that, because it can be a bit soul destroying if someone says, oh, I don't like that or something, which people can be really unkind sometimes. So anyway, come onto an art group because everyone's going to be working at the same level as you and everyone's going to be really understanding, and hopefully you should be able to share what you've done. So I'm going to take off my tape in a minute from my painting. Hope you like it. Hope you've enjoyed painting along. Looks quite good from a distance. I'm going to be posting up the picture on the page soon, so you'll be able to see what it looks like with all the tape off. And hope you have a lovely evening. Hope you enjoy your tea and keep in touch so that you can see when the next one's going to be posted up. And I'll see you later, Ray. All right, see you later. Bye.